Hello, everyone! Today we're going to talk about The Time Machine, Chapter 10 through the epilogue. After escaping from the Morlocks, the time traveler travels further into the future. At first, hundreds of thousands of years further into the future, and then 30 million years further into the future. The chapter describing these final two trips into the future, Chapter 11, is really one of the bleakest, eeriest, and yet most realistic pieces of writing I've ever read. However hokey or old-fashioned or outdated certain parts of this novel might seem, this chapter really haunts me. It seems to capture something deeply disconcerting and yet, I think, accurate. Traveling hundreds of thousands of years beyond the Eloi and the Morlocks, the time traveler comes to a desolate beach where, far away up the desolate slope, I heard a harsh scream and saw a thing like a huge white butterfly go slanting and fluttering up into the sky and, circling, disappear over some low hillocks beyond. The sound of its voice was so dismal that I shivered and seated myself more firmly upon the machine. Looking round me again, I saw that, quite near, what I had taken to be a reddish mass of rock was moving slowly towards me. Then I saw the thing was really a monstrous crab-like creature. The time traveler doesn't even recognize these creatures. The Eloi and the Morlocks were clearly descendants of humans, but the first creature he sees here he describes as a thing like a huge white butterfly, and the other creature is a monstrous crab-like creature. These things are like a butterfly and like a crab, but are they descendants of butterflies and crabs? Or of other things? Or even maybe of humans? The time traveler doesn't know. He can say what these creatures are like in terms of the world he's coming from, but he doesn't know what they really are, except that they're frightening. We have no idea, of course, if in the distant future there will be things like giant butterflies and things like giant crabs. What strikes me as being realistic about this portrayal of the future is how alien it is. How inhuman. Humans appear to have absolutely nothing to do with this future world. They've vanished so completely there aren't even any traces of humans left. These creatures appear to have no knowledge of humans. They appear to have never even encountered any ruins of humanity. Whether or not humans ever existed doesn't seem to matter in this world. It's as if humans never did exist. The time traveler tells his listeners, "I cannot convey the sense of abominable desolation that hung over the world. The red eastern sky, the northward blackness, the salt Dead Sea, the stony beach crawling with these foul, slow-stirring monsters, the uniform poisonous-looking green of the lichenous plants, the thin air that hurts one's lungs, all contributed to an appalling effect." Whether Wells got the details of this future correct or not isn't relevant. What's relevant is that I think he does come really close to conveying this beach's sense of abominable desolation. As far as we know, right now, in the early 21st century, it is likely that the human species will eventually go extinct, or, if we're very lucky, evolve into something completely different. Far in the future, the world is going to be absolutely nothing like we know. And I think Wells captures this sense of how utterly strange the future is going to be. The time traveler then travels even further into the future, 30 million years into the future. And there, the darkness grew apace. A cold wind began to blow in freshening gusts from the east, and the showering white flakes in the air increased in number. From the edge of the sea came a ripple and a whisper. Beyond these lifeless sounds, the world was silent. Silent? It would be hard to convey the stillness of it. All the sounds of man, the bleating of sheep, the cries of birds, the hum of insects, the stir that makes the background of our lives, all that was over. Not just human beings, but the background of human life. All those sights and sounds you don't notice because they're always there, because you take them for granted. Those are gone too. The world does not even feel like the world to the time traveler anymore. The final thing he sees in this future is this. As I stood sick and confused, I saw again the moving thing upon the shoal. There was no mistake now that it was a moving thing, against the red water of the sea. It was a round thing, the size of a football perhaps, or it may be bigger, and tentacles trailed down from it. It seemed black against the weltering blood-red water, and it was hopping fitfully about. Then I felt I was fainting. But a terrible dread of lying helpless in that remote and awful twilight sustained me while I clambered back upon the saddle. At first, he could not even tell if this thing was alive or dead. It appears to be alive and to have tentacles, but that's all he can say about it. He can only call it a moving thing. Life itself is barely recognizable to him at this point in time. When the time traveler returns to his present, to the 1890s, the problem of perspective arises again. The novel, like the time traveler, returns to its beginning. After the time traveler finishes his story, his listeners respond to it from their personal, professional, historical, and very limited points of view. The editor thinks about the quality of the story the time traveler has told. The editor stood up with a sigh. "What a pity it is you're not a writer of stories," he said, putting his hand on the time traveler's shoulder. He thinks it's potentially a great work of fiction, but he doesn't believe it. The medical man worries the time traveler is sick. The medical man looked into his face and, with a certain hesitation, told him he was suffering from overwork, at which he laughed hugely. What's most interesting is that even the time traveler, now that he's back in the 1890s, is having trouble believing what's happened to him. He stared around the room. "I'm damned if it isn't all going. This room and you and the atmosphere of every day is too much for my memory. Did I ever make a time machine or a model of a time machine? Or was it all only a dream? They say life is a dream, a precious poor dream at times, but I can't stand another that won't fit. It's madness. And where did this dream come from? I must look at that machine, if there is one." I don't think these lines are supposed to make us wonder if, in the world of the novel, any of this really happened or if the time traveler is crazy. I think what they do is point out the incompatibility of certain perspectives. As the time traveler says, they say life is a dream, a precious poor dream at times, but I can't stand another that won't fit. The future is a world that doesn't fit the present. That seems impossible in the present. We can read works of physics that predict the eventual collapse of our solar system and all the stars in the universe burning out, and we can read books like The Time Machine that imagine a future where humans are long gone. But it's really hard for us to believe, I think, that these are things that are going to really happen. Or at least it's really difficult, maybe impossible, for us to think about these things and live our daily lives. Even if we know a future like Wells describes is a possibility, even if science tells us a dark and empty universe is, in the distant future, a probability, it's still hard for us, like the editor, the medical man, or the time traveler himself, to take these ideas seriously. We're so used to the world we live in that the different worlds that have existed in the past and will exist in the future seem like dreams to us. At the end of the book, the narrator of the whole book thinks of the time traveler. He, I know, for the question had been discussed among us long before the time machine was made, thought but cheerlessly of the advancement of mankind, and saw in the growing pile of civilization only a foolish heaping that must inevitably fall back upon and destroy its makers in the end. If that is so, it remains for us to live as though it were not so. Here really is the absolute limit of our perspective. There are things that we know are possible, or probable, or inevitable, but we have to live and think as though those things were impossible, because we could not go about our lives otherwise. There are things we know, but cannot allow ourselves to really know. The novel ends with lines that might seem very conventional or even sentimental. The narrator has the flowers Weena gave to the time traveler, and he thinks, "And I have by me, for my comfort, 2 strange white flowers, shriveled now, and brown and flat and brittle, to witness that even when mind and strength had gone, gratitude and a mutual tenderness still lived on in the heart of man." But I get the sense that the narrator has to end the novel this way, with an affirmation of the continued existence of human gratitude and tenderness. He knows from the time traveler's story that human gratitude and tenderness and humanity itself all eventually stop existing, vanish. But the narrator has to focus on the fact that humans and human feelings continue to exist for at least a little while. To think that they ever vanish completely is not only too painful, it's also not quite thinkable. To imagine the complete absence of not only yourself, but everyone like you and the world you lived in is almost impossible. Even if you try to imagine a completely blank and empty universe, you're still imagining yourself seeing it. You're imagining a gaze looking at it. But if everything is gone, if all humans are gone, there's not even that gaze on it. Perspective itself wouldn't exist. So our present perspective and the world that will probably exist in the future are like two dreams that simply don't fit. This is why, for me, The Time Machine is very much a product of its time and also very contemporary. Even though the book was shaped by the ideas and ideologies of the 1890s, it nevertheless brings us right to the limit of human knowledge, to the limit of what it's possible for human beings to think.